We're looking at Jacob, and as you guys are all aware, hospice has been called in, and all the sons are around their father's bed, and he is speaking one by one as he goes around. Picture them standing there, and Jacob, the father, is speaking into each of his sons. Now, there are some aspects of these blessings that are relatively clear. Some are very enigmatic as far as how to understand these things. And I did prepare this morning for the blessing of Issachar and the donkey, and I have the whole set of slides at the bottom of this stack here. But I got to thinking about this, and I'm going to just do a pause here, and we're going to talk about, gee, how do we understand these blessings, and give some language for that this morning. So we're gonna put the blessings on pause, even though this morning's presentation will pertain to the blessings, but we're going to look at kind of take a pause here. By way of review, we finished up with Zebulun. He's the fifth. I think he's the sixth son of Leah, as I recall. I don't have that all in my head right now, but he's the fifth blessing. And what we can derive, this is from last time, Zebulun, like many of us, did not have a predominant voice within his family. His father's words to him allude to a future in sea-related commerce, as the text read, which appears to have occurred as supported from Deuteronomy 33. Centuries later, when King Hezekiah made the call to return to the Lord, the men of Zebulun played a significant role. The name Zebulun is somewhat connected to the Hebrew word for prince. Could it be, and then I derive something from that, could it be that Zebulun is a prince in the sense that he carried out his call in and through business? He played his role, no more, no less, that God gave him. This role was recognized and blessed by his father years later when the king called for a return of heart. Zebulun's descendants stepped up to help restore righteousness within the nation. So, and this really, we're all over the map here. We have a blessing to a man, from a father to a son. We have so then we're trying to derive meaning from that. What does that mean to him? Issachar will be a good point, a donkey. What does that mean to him? But then I'm now moving all over and looking at his descendants. How do we derive meaning? The simple idea here would be, we read a text and we want to derive meaning from that text. The question is, well, how do we do that? And so I'm going to just kind of lay out some things this morning of how do we interpret these things, because there is in a sense, this is prophetic literature, and prophetic literature has long ongoing meaning. It could have there's an immediate sense and there's a longer sense. And so these are the questions that I ponder about, and I wanted to spend a little time. So a brief time out to ask some important questions. Number one, how has the Jewish community throughout history understood these blessings? I think that'd be a good question to ask, because that's who they're targeted to. And so I've got this little image here of some young Jewish fellow with the Israeli flag there, playing some pool. And how does the Jewish community look at these blessings? Where does a Jew today gain his or her identity is really the question. Is it personally, immediate family, Jewish race, national identity, which would be specifically with the nation of Israel, and that was prompted by the Zionist movement in the early 20th century. or tribal identity. This is really the question I was asking. Do the Jews, what percentage of the Jewish community know their tribal heritage? Now, because we're looking at these blessings. Each blessing is to the father of a tribe, of one of the tribes of Israel. And so how important to the Jewish community is to understand their tribal connection, so therefore they would then identify with the blessing to the particular son. Do you see my reasoning? So history, what is history borne out as far as the Jewish community? Any thoughts on it? Dave, do you have any thoughts on that? Where did the Jewish... Dave Brown, he's drinking coffee, I guess no. You have any comments? Yes.
My only thought is totally a guess, is that the Jews have become so secular that I don't even know how connected they are to even the Old Testament. So I'm a little skeptical that they might know their lineage and all that.
Well, for what little research I had time to do, is that what I found is that very, very few Jewish people have a connection to their tribal identity. There are some exceptions to that within the Levites. You know, there's some of the Levite tribe, the priestly tribe, but by far, most Jews, at least from my research, which is, time challenged, do not know their tribal identity. So, in interpretation, the Jewish community wouldn't look at these texts and then say, "Well, I'm from the tribe of Judah, so I'm like Judah." You see what I'm saying? So they don't look at it that way. I think where I've landed is that the Jewish community has always viewed their identity as being a son or a daughter of Abraham. And I think that's critical, a son or a daughter of Abraham. And so therefore, they find their identity Jewish race. You, Dick, your point kind of alluded to national identity. When I was there 30 years ago, certainly there is a national identity, but what I'm trying to get a point across is that the reason they have a national identity is because they're Jewish. Yeah. So anyway, what we can derive from this is that the Jews do not connect these blessings. They're not trying to identify and understand who they are, because this is who the blessing is for. They're not trying to understand their own identity, who they are as a person, by looking at the blessing of their forefather. Okay, so that's one thing. And then secondly is, how should we, the church in general, and as Christians, look at prophetic scripture in general and these blessings in particular? And then a third question, just naturally falls, what meaning is there for us? We're trying to understand the meaning of these blessings. So this is what I've come up with is, a way to understand Jacob's blessings is that we've been moving in these three circles. There's a personal blessing to a son. There's a tribal aspect of that. The commentators that I read always connect, in case in point would be Zebulun. Years later, the men of Zebulun, and they're, the ancestors, this is like 500 years later. The commentators are trying to derive meaning. Well, how does the blessing to this son correlate to years later? And so you've been seeing me talk about that. So there's a tribal aspect, and then all of Israel. all of Israel as a nation. How does this affect the nation? Remember, the Jewish community, they derive their identity from being a son or a daughter of Israel. So I'd like to suggest that the way I've looked at this is that these blessings are targeted to a specific people, a person, and the people within that heritage. But there is meaning for that. I mean, and we've identified 3 levels, 3 concentric circles, and they can all be true. What can be true personally, can be true tribally, can be true as a nation. And those are not, these blessings are not to us in the church, but we can pull meaning. We can derive meaning from it. It's God's word. And as we look at this, there's application for us within the time and the place we live. Now this is more for me than it is, I want to be true to the text, and I want to suggest real application to us today. So I got to thinking about, having said that, I got to thinking about this last couple of weeks, the coat of many colors. We've all heard of the coat of many colors. And when Jacob made a coat years prior to where we are now, he made a coat of many colors for his son Joseph. And that's in Genesis 37:3. The reason, as stated within the text, was, quote, because Israel loved Joseph more than all of his sons. Joseph was a favorite son. And note the use of Jacob's covenant name, Israel. Just kind of sit on that for a minute. Didn't use the word Jacob, but the word Israel made this coat for his favorite son. The brothers, Joseph's brothers, were jealous of Joseph because of his exclusive standing with their father. The coat of many colors played a key role in their plan to silence Joseph. That really irritated them. And then Joseph comes back with the vision of the sheaves. Remember that? There were sheaves in the field, and all of the other sheaves were bowing down. That didn't help matters. Didn't help his cause at all. And the coat of many colors was perceived by all as a symbol of multifaceted favor. Favor to his son. In other words, Jacob had 12 sons. He pulled out one son. Now, Benjamin wasn't born yet. He pulled out one son as the favorite. And that is, of course, often the case. All right. You guys are going, where in the world is he going with this? Well, just hang on. Just hang on with me. We're having some fun. So decades later, all of Jacob's sons have been reconciled. Now we're fast forwarding to the now in our text, chapter 49, from 37 to 49. And the brothers have been reconciled through a remarkable sequence of events culminating in a moving act of forgiveness. Remember that? Oh my goodness, it's so powerful. It's, Joseph brings them into the room and sends everybody out, and he says, I am Joseph. Can you imagine that? It's just amazing. After what they had done, and of course Judah, we've talked about Judah taking the role. He stood up. He was going to be surety for Benjamin. There's a lot of great story of Joseph. And it all culminates in that room where Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and then forgives them. Yes?
One of the most amazing things, I think, is that the 11 brothers, I think one of them might recognize him.
Yeah. Yeah.
They look probably somewhat alike.
Well, it seems like they would. Of course, they had,
Almost like God just blocked that recognition factor
yeah.
up until that point in time.
Maybe. That's good. That's a really good question. Why couldn't they have recognized him? Yeah. Well, they didn't. And of course, Joseph's words are, you meant it for evil. He was able to acknowledge their intent, but God meant it for good. That's so powerful to think about. Yeah, Dave.
Two somewhat unconnected things, and this kind of thing, when I do this kind of study, I often ask them, what ifs, or I wonder, so I don't have answers to these, just kind of like the things you're posing. I would ask the question, I wonder if Joseph's coat had 12 colors.
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah.
And then the other thing, prophetically, I find it meaningful that we have Judah who was willing to act as a surety for his brother. And we have the Lion of the tribe of Judah who came as a surety
Exactly.
for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that instance in Egypt, those many, many years ago, you have to really pray and consider to get the prophetic link of that. But I do think it's prophetic.
I do too. And again, the question, that pondering is, gee, is it just happenstance, or is there an intended correlation? And I think there is. Judah's a lion. Judah roared when he stood for surety, and there was a day, I like that term, the day the lion roared, when Jesus died on the cross. The Lion of Judah. Just, oh my, that's, yeah, and I think there is correlation. So at this time, we're now around the hospice bed. At this moment in our history, the sons are all present, standing around their dying father, hearing his last words addressed to each of them. Life for this family has been filled with twists and turns and joys and sorrows. We've looked at it extensively. Never could they have imagined that they, the family of promise, remember, they are operating under a promise that God had given them, that they would end up in Egypt. They would end up in Egypt under the rule of a benevolent but yet polytheistic administration. Isn't it true how life throws curves? Who would ever have imagined this family, under the promise of God, would have to be uprooted to go to this place, this Egypt, this polytheistic place, be reconnected with a family member and live out their days there, receive blessing within that context that has, in my opinion, meaning for the future. That is a wild story. Yeah. So, in this sense, through a lifetime of twists and turns, joys and sorrow, oh, I got a coast there. A second coat has been weaved. Okay, this is my little application here. A second coat of many colors has been weaved through time. This coat has returned to Jacob, and he now identifies and articulates each aspect of the variegated garment which has been weaved through time. Do you see my point? Is that there was a coat of many colors. Was it 12? I don't know. But now Jacob's coat of many colors is now around his hospice bed. And he's speaking, it's truly a coat of many colors, such as the life we all have, that we've weaved. And the question, let me start here. We've all weaved a coat of many colors through our life. And the question I have, is, can you identify one way life has turned out differently than you had imagined.
Just one?
Yeah. So I think at the, we just took a little aside today, and I think for the remainder of the time around your tables, why don't you think about this for a minute and just share with the other guys at the table of, one way, at least one way, life has turned out through the twists and turns, joys and sorrows. Life has turned out differently than what you had imagined years before. What was maybe one curveball? And if you can put a value on it or not, that's up to you. But why don't we just finish up with that today? And we'll call it good. And we'll pick up, I promise, we'll pick up with the donkey next week. So.
All right. All right, Mr. Roots.
Yeah.